philosophy, never stop honeymooning, they have celebrated some 55 years of marriage. Ife Keene received her BA degree in sociology from Howard University and had a prolific career in the information systems field. She retired as an information systems executive and the co-owner slash vice president of Quality Solutions Incorporated, a management consultant firm. She has published two works of fiction, Cancer of the Spirit and All of a Sudden It's Too Late. Damani King returned to Howard University after military service and earning an MA degree from Cornell University. He worked in student affairs for 32 years, reaching the rank of a special assistant to the vice provost for student affairs. With retirement, he was able to focus on his lifetime interest in history. After years of on and off searching for genealogical data on his family, he was able to write many essays and a family memoir titled Keene Reddick Roots. Damani's research eventually uncovered stunning revelations about his once enslaved maternal grandmother, Mariah. These disclosures motivated him to search more. In time, he discovered that the obscure enslaved African woman he found in Franklin, Tennessee was anything but that. Mariah was a celebrity. The Kings were inspired to share her story widely. Damani and Ife chose historical fiction as the genre to chronicle her life. Their work, as you heard, titled Clandestine, The Times and Secret Life of Mariah Otey Reddick. They wove together the precise facts of Mariah's life and major historical events of both her ancestors and her descendants. They tell the story from the perspective of enslaved and free Africans, Native Americans, and Euro-American allies. Their presentation today will highlight and focus on the documented history that inspired their writing. Remember, our program is being recorded. Welcome, Damani and Ife.
Hi, Damani, I think you need to unmute.
Much.
Sorry about that. Technology speaks again. Thank you very much. Great invitation, Lavana. Introduction. We really appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
We are truly honored and filled with gratitude to be here this afternoon.
Indeed, indeed. Well, we started out, this was a suggestion from Eric. He suggested maybe we could show an ocean view. This is not from our house, but this is from nearby. And our editor is on the call. She actually took this picture, Ife Grady. So in the distance, you'll see the Pacific Ocean, and back behind one of those hills is our house. So welcome to you from Panama. Thank you so very much, everybody, for joining us. We have people on the line that we've known for most of our lives.
Over 40 years in some cases.
The person who introduced us the second day of our freshman year is on, Matt, and others that we've met along the way in our life. So listen, we're going to get into it. It's hard for us to keep this story brief, so we're going to do our best. First of all, we want to try today to give you some idea of what we're going to tell you. We want to go through a little bit about why we wrote, how we wrote, what we wrote, the genre that we chose, which Yolanda mentioned, and show you a video summary of one of the major plot lines of the book, and talk about the recognition of family and something we call honor thy ancestor. And we're going to share with you what we found, the historical events, things we found about the family, tragedy, joy, accomplishments, and legacy. So I'm struggling here with one thing, but we'll work it out. So Clandestine. The Times and Secret Life of Mariah Otey Reddick. She was my great grandmother. And when we came to Panama, I retired from Howard so we could move to Panama. And I began doing family research. And it was pretty frustrating. After a while, I kind of threw my hands up in the air. And one night, I'd never forget, I just decided, let me Google Mariah's name. And it was like the Library of Congress, the doors just flung open, and it was just amazing how much information there was about this woman who I did not expect to find almost anything. And one of the startling things that I found is that at 10 years old, she had been given away as a human wedding gift. And that combined with the family lore that she was a spy for the Union, made it pretty compelling. So we went to Franklin, Tennessee, her hometown, my mom's hometown, and we were inspired.
While enslaved, Mariah, Damani's great grandmother, was matched with her first husband, Harvey Otey Sr., by the owners of the third plantation on which she was enslaved. And after his first wife, Phoebe, died, Harvey and Phoebe had 8 children, as did Mariah and Harvey. Damani's great-grandfather, Mariah's second husband, Bolin Reddick, they had 1 child, John Watt Reddick, and you will be hearing quite a bit about him during this presentation.
So as a history buff, and we both realized that history has been used as a weapon against African people. You see some of the falsehoods that we laid out here. And so we consciously chose to attack that head on and to combat Eurocentric hegemony. And so it was pretty obvious. This is an old illustration showing the quote, happy slaves, and they're singing about how happy they are. And this is just, nonsense. So those images and myths are portrayed and perpetuated in popular culture. And they amount to a lot of distortions and lies. And we want to do our little part to try to offset some of that. So
the terminology we chose to use was really an attempt to accurately convey who we are as a people and to expose many of the distortions about the realities of our existence.
So we were pretty careful about the terminology that we used. And what was really interesting to us, we had one person who had read the book when it was an ebook and told us how it moved her to understand the meaning of the term enslaved as opposed to slave. So we knew we were on the right track. We also used images to accurately portray the experience of Africans in the Americas, as well as in the world. And both of these places in the world are also in Clandestine.
And since I am not the history buff that Damani is, I was unaware of the magnitude of the resistance of our people against our oppressors, and was fascinated to learn about the Black Seminoles and the Native Americans fighting against the Americans in the 18th and 19th centuries. So creating this novel was more than just writing another book. It really gave me an opportunity to do a different kind of writing. And above all, it gave me an opportunity to grow.
So why historical fiction?
We chose historical fiction as the genre for Clandestine because it really allowed us to tell an exciting, intriguing, and fact-based story that intermingles historical fiction and facts with real events and real people.
So, you know, it was very interesting because we quickly realized we started off to tell just a simple family story, you know.
Yeah.
And almost right away, we realized we were telling a lot of family stories, not just one family story. And so it turned quickly into a saga. And well, anyway, you can see if you're on the screen, it sweeps across portions of 3 centuries, 3 continents, and the Caribbean. But here's one thing we'd like for you all to think about. Given the destruction and the incompleteness of records and the fact that a lot of what African people did had to be covert for their own protection, we realize, and I wonder whether you've thought about the fact that your ancestors may have participated in major events that you're unaware of. For example, did your ancestor fire a cannon at African Fort in Florida? Something to think about.
Another impetus for us to write Clandestine is something we call linking generations. And this is really all about stressing the importance of our young folks playing an integral role in preserving our people's history. And one of the ways Damani and I tried to do this is get our children involved in projects that we have undertaken that focus on uplifting African culture. So one way that we have gotten our children involved in this project is having our son, oldest son, Khalid, and his son, our grandson, Kay, create a trailer for Clandestine. And this is what we will show you now.
Clandestine, The Times and Secret Life of Mariah Otey Reddick is a new and exciting historical novel telling a story of intrigue and adventure centered around a love story. In 1848, Mariah, an enslaved 10-year-old black girl, is ripped from her mother's embrace as her sister screams in horror. Mariah is given away as a wedding gift and taken from Louisiana to Tennessee, never to see her family again. Clasping the amulet her mother fashioned and gave to her for protection and solace, she holds on to it and the African traditions passed down to her, including her secret African name, which means blessing. Mariah, haunted by a childhood betrayal of another enslaved girl, grows into a resistor of bondage and helps others escape slavery. Years later, while working in the household of the Confederacy's president, Jefferson Davis, she becomes a spy for the Union. A wounded Confederate officer catches her clandestinely passing military information to Union sympathizers in the rebel Army hospital in 1863 in Montgomery, Alabama. Mariah faces either the gallows or a whipping post, but defies the major when he detains and interrogates her. Her bravery and tenacity are sparked by the stories of her freedom-fighting ancestors, including her grandfather, who was a sharpshooter at African Fort with the Seminoles in Florida. After the U.S. Civil War, Mariah and her true love struggle against KKK violence during the era of Reconstruction while dealing with bitter political conflicts within the family, and they must thwart a traitorous colored blackmailer and abort the deadly plans of the same now badly crippled and deranged ex-Confederate Mariah had defied in the hospital, as well as his son, a fanatical deserter, both of whom are sworn to revenge. Mariah tempts fate more than once. Her world is one filled with love, danger, spirituality, vengeance, joy, grief, loyalty, devotion, resistance, and resilience. Clandestine, inspired by true events, is her family's struggle for dignity and freedom, as told by her great-grandson Damani Keene and his wife Ife.
So, when we began to find out information about um, Mariah, we went to Franklin. And one of our first places to stop was at the cemetery where she's buried. And y'all, she's buried in the Toussaint Louverture Cemetery. I mean, I don't know about you, but Franklin, Tennessee has a cemetery named after Toussaint Louverture. Pretty amazing to me. And so we poured libation at the grave of Mariah, her husband, her second husband, my great grandfather Bowen, and my grandparents, John and Della Reddick. And we went to the plantation. And this picture shows me standing in the quarters. It's the last remaining building where Mariah may have lived 170 some years ago. And it was quite a feeling to stand in that room, to feel the presence of ancestors, and to wonder if Mariah had slept on a pallet on the floor in that room. And we were really helped by local historians and archivists. And one was Thelma Bell. And she's shown here in this picture with Ife. And she really became like family to us, just a sweetheart, a really amazing researcher. She's written several books and does great work.
Yeah, we were really fortunate to have several historians in Franklin who were willing to give us an abundance of priceless and factual information that we included in the book. Some of that information really sparked some exciting storylines in the book as well.
Yes, it did. So you see Rick Warwick here, Tina Jones, and to the right, Robert Hicks is author. And while I was researching, trying to find my family, he had written a book called Widow of the South. And Mariah was one of 3 or 4 main characters in the book, unbeknownst to me, a New York Times bestseller. And as a result of that, Mariah's picture had been on CBS network in a story about his book. So it was pretty amazing. So one thing led to another, and our family went to Franklin on a couple of different occasions. One was, you see in this picture, my first cousin, Porter James, 2 of his children, and their spouses and grandchildren, and his wife, Gail. And then the Oteys, these 3 people here who are descendants of Harvey Otey and his first wife, Phoebe. And we had an excellent time meeting with them. This was on the occasion of well, we'll get to that in a second. And this is a picture of Ife and myself, along with our 3 kids and our grandson at the Carnson House.
And our daughter, Dr. Quayle King Carson, was really a priceless resource in reviewing our final edits for Clandestine. She spent countless hours on and off, often on an emotional roller coaster, reading and offering feedback that's now embedded in the book. Following is just a little brief reaction to Quaylee's visit to Quarantine.
My name is Quaylee Keene Carson. I'm the proud daughter of Ife and Damani Keene, and the very proud great-great-granddaughter of Mariah. The trip to Carnton Plantation in February 2018 was really a game changer for me. I've always been proud of my family, our heritage, but the feeling of pride that came over me while walking on the land where my great-great-grandmother had walked and lived and was enslaved was very powerful and very emotional. It reminded me that even with all of the inhumanity and cruelty of slavery, not only was survival possible, but thriving and loving and joy and persistence were possible. Mariah was an incredible woman. If I take off these glasses, I'm not gonna be able to read. Hold on, y'all.
Take your time, Saga.
Mariah was an incredible woman, and I feel stronger knowing that her blood is flowing through my veins.
Okay, y'all, that was a technical challenge that we came. I'm so happy. So one of the occasions when we went to Franklin was for the dedication of the Reddick Street apartments. And this is interesting because when I was a kid in the 50s, my mom shared with me a newspaper article, a clipping. I'm a pack rat, so I still have it. And it mentioned just in passing that the Reddick homes had been named for her father, John White Reddick. So when we went to Franklin, we discovered that very few, if anybody, knew who the Reddick Street and the Reddick homes were named after. Not even to mention whether it was a Black person or not. So it gives you an idea of how history can be lost in a generation or two. And so we worked with the Franklin Housing Authority, and they were very, very cooperative. And so they acknowledged John White Reddick. They helped establish this historical marker with First Cousin Porter that you see there. And so it was quite an occasion.
And in an effort to involve potential readers of Clandestine, we launched a campaign which we entitled Honor Our Ancestors prior to the book being published. And what we did was solicit from these potential readers a name of an ancestor that they would like to have used in the book as a fictional character. The intent was to tell their ancestor story, but just to acknowledge and honor their ancestor in the hopes that they would tell their own story one day. The campaign was really very, very successful. We received over 40 names that we did use as fictional characters in the book.
And those combined with a number from our own family, we included. And if you visit with visit our website, clandestine-life.com. There's a page that lists all of the ancestors whose names were submitted and the person who submitted them, and the chapter in which their name first appears. So what did we discover? I already told you some of it, but this one I think was really just stunning to us. And that is that in November of 1862, the husband of Mariah's so-called owner wrote a letter to one of the rather famous Confederate generals, Breckinridge. And he makes reference in it to the arrangements he made with the Colonel Clithwell to give a military escort to take his Negroes to safety in Alabama, far from the reach of Union troops. And of course, Mariah was one of those enslaved Africans who was taken to Alabama. And as you saw before, she was soon detailed to work in the household of Jefferson Davis. So this was an amazing document to see in the first place. So here are the master and the mistress of Carnton, John and Carrie McGavick. His family was well known. He had his father and his nephew were both mayor of Nashville at some point, and here they are a bit older. Carrie McGavick always wore black from her teenage years on, and nobody knows why. But when you read Clandestine, you'll find out that we give up the secret.
And it's an intriguing secret.
It has something to do with New Orleans. So Carnton Plantation itself, as our daughter Quay mentioned, and Ife has alluded to as well, it was quite the experience to walk on those grounds where we knew Mariah had been. And this is the outside of that one quarters that remains. It's the only one that remains today. 4 rooms, 2 upstairs, 2 downstairs, 1 window, 1 door, and a fireplace in each. And for a family of 6 or 8 or 10 sharing the space, not a large space. Resistance.
Yeah, the resistance occurred in many forms. And one of the clandestine acts of resistance by the enslaved, and I can really relate to this as a mother, was for parents to hold back information from their children about the totality and brutality of slavery. They did this for fear that their children at some point would want to retaliate, which would ultimately cause harm to both themselves and their children.
So as Ife said, resistance took a lot of different forms. I want to add something. My mother actually did the same thing that Ife just described. She withheld information from me at a time when she thought I might do something, crazy, even though she'd already told me about it years before. But on the left, you'll see this $100 reward. This is in Nashville, just 20 miles north of Franklin. And in today's dollars, that'd be over $3,000 reward. So it gives you an idea of the value. And on the right is an article from the Cincinnati newspaper about a plot in 1856. Mariah would have been 18 years old, and a slave insurrection by enslaved Africans was uncovered, and several people were put to death as a result. And of course, escape was sort of an ultimate form of resistance, and the Underground Railroad in the very early years went south, and that plays a part in our story as well, south to Florida. But in Memphis, in Tennessee, Jacob Burkle, a German immigrant, ran a major station on the Underground Railroad, and today it's a museum. He makes an appearance in our novel too. Espionage. This was a critical advantage that the Union had. You'll see on the left statement by Frederick Douglass and by the Union spy master Alan Pinkerton, speaking of the importance of the information that they received from both free and enslaved Africans. And on the right, General Lee and General Claiborne, who's a very interesting character and has a lot of connection to the Carnton plantation and to Franklin. Unfortunately, Alan Pinkerton destroyed all of his records at the end of the war to avoid retribution to his spies, both white and African. These are the known African spies for the Union. On the left, the men, on the right, the women. Some were members of the Loyal League, talk about that in a second. And most of these acted independently. Those who were part of the Loyal League would have been the ones whose records were destroyed to protect them. And so family lore says that Mariah Otey Reddick was a spy in Jeff Davis's Montgomery home, just as Elizabeth Bowser, who is more well known, obviously, because her records were, or speeches about her were made, who was a spy in the Richmond home of Jeff Davis, along with a coachman and a butler. So Jeff Davis was surrounded by Black spies. I had no idea. So the Loyal League was a clandestine group with many names, and it was formed before the war. One of its early leaders was William Howard Day. He argued that the US Constitution was an anti-slavery document. Not everybody agreed with him, but he said it was the basis upon which Africans could struggle within the US system for their freedom. And they saw the war coming and prepared for it. And when the war broke out, Alan Pinkerton indicated they were ready. And you see their challenge phrase that they use. We'd also like to give a shout out to the late Harry Jones of the African American Civil War Memorial in DC. He did a lot of really great work on this. The Battle of Franklin. Most of us, when we talk about the Civil War, we know about Gettysburg, Antietam, Sherman's attack on Atlanta, and so on. But the Battle of Franklin is not known as well, and the impact that it had on the Confederate Army was amazing. You see this quote here, one of the local people said that groves of trees were turned into forests of toothpicks. Amazing. But the Confederate Army had major casualties, and they were crippled in the western area of the war. The house at Carnton was turned into a Confederate hospital. Hundreds of soldiers died there. Some of Mariah's children were there at Carnton during that time. We're not sure if she was. She may still have been in Montgomery. 6 Confederate generals were killed. 6 others were captured. This is the most generals of the Confederate Army and maybe ever in world history to have been killed in one battle. Excuse me. The South Army of Tennessee, which was a major part of their army, was decimated. They only fought one more battle. They lost that also in Nashville. The McGavicks of Carnton House donated 2 acres of their property for Confederate cemetery, and more than 1,200 Confederate soldiers are buried there.
And in addition to the cemetery, where it is alleged that Mariah assisted Carrie in attending, there's a family plot there with 2 of Mariah's children, Damani's grand uncles, Wanda and Isaiah. They were a set of twins, and they are buried at Carnton.
That was an amazing find.
Yes.
There were a lot of documents that we found. We didn't have time to include all of them. We have voting records and tax records and all the rest.
But we got this marriage license.
Yeah. So the marriage license was issued several months after the war ended. It appears that Boland followed Mariah to Franklin from Montgomery, and they got married on the 28th. Was it actually issued on the 28th? But this other document is really amazing. It turns out that Mariah was an eyewitness to a deadly riot in Franklin in 1867. It was turned into a battle between the conservatives, who were mostly former Confederates, and the Union League, a lot of radicals. Interestingly, both groups had both white and African members. And there was controversy about who fired the first shots. And Mariah testified in her deposition that it was the conservatives who fired first, the former Confederates. And this is the typed transcript of her deposition. She had learned to read, but not to write. And so her signature is an X, and then somebody signed her name. Absolutely amazing to be able to read her words all these years later. These are the founders of the KKK in Franklin. And this man, George Nichols, was persuaded in 1915 by his wife to write down fireworks, y'all, fireworks, to write down the founders of the KKK Clavern in Franklin. And here they are. And this is his statement written on a spare piece of paper. What's interesting about this is the same year on Main Street, Franklin was the site of the first documented lynching of a Jewish person. You're celebrating.
Panamanians love fireworks.
Yes, it did. In the United States, Mr. Deerfield, one of his employees, Mr. Bauman, and another African were the victims of that. So that same year, dramatic events occurred in the lives of the family. The Reddick Keene family lore make two claims. One, that Mariah was a spy for the Union, and second, that Boland went to jail for allegedly killing a man over Mariah. Only one claim has been confirmed as yet. But no more spoilers. If you haven't read the book, we're not going to ruin the rest of it for you, surprises. During this time, the Klan was terrorizing, and on their night rides, here you have two leaders of the Klan, Nathan Bedford Forrest and Albert Pike. The first national meeting of the Klan was held right up the road in Nashville, where some of Mariah's children lived by that time. And so these events had a major impact on the people of the area. Because of the terrorism and because people were just looking for a chance for a better life, Pap Singleton and others organized migrations of African folks to Kansas, and which was free land, a free territory, I should say. And in 1875, a newspaper reported that 2,000 people left Williamson County, which is where Franklin is, left as a group going to Kansas. And so clearly Mariah would have known a lot of those people. The other document that we found was really something else. This was a notice put in a newspaper in Virginia by Boland, my great-grandfather's sister, Nanny, looking for him. She put this in the paper 3 decades after the war, and she mentions that she was not even born when Boland was sold away. And sadly, we do not know whether Boland ever saw this ad, or whether they ever found each other. But it just shows how awful chattel slavery was. So history written as lightning. This movie was protested all around the country as a hate film. And in Clandestine, the release of the film is a critical turning point in the story that we're telling. This is one of the protests. This was in Boston, a large protest organized by William Monroe Tribe. And so we can see then that Black lives also matter. When Boland died in 1910, he was obviously well-respected. Community leaders were the pallbearers. His gravestone was a particular unique style that was provided by the Woodsmen of the World. It was a self-help burial association. And here you see a short card of thanks that was published by his widow and their only son, John, in the local paper. John Watt Reddick, Papa. He was a sharp looking dude, wasn't he?
Granddad.
This is my granddad, who I never met. I'm born on his birthday, but he died 4 years before I was born. He was a Buffalo soldier, served in the Philippines. He was a railway mail clerk. As we say, he had a good government job. He was a community leader. He was a leader of at least two self-help organizations, Mosaic Templars, United Brothers of Friendship, and Sisters of the Mysterious 10. He was also a Mason. He was not a Prince Hall Mason. He was a Scottish Rite Mason. It's called the Olive Branch chapter of the Masons. And he and others co-hosted a fundraiser for those who've been affected by a bad storm. And they had the Fisk Jubilee singers come and perform in Franklin. This is a meeting of the United Brothers of Friendship. This is my Papa right here. And so before he was the state Grand Master, at a meeting that they had, a state meeting they had in Franklin. And we were really quite amazed to find that on the historical marker at the cemetery, that Mariah was one of only two notables mentioned on the marker. And these photographs here are of panels of a mural that are on a building on the site where Papa's house once stood. And one about Mariah and Boland, and one about John and his family. And right here in the corner, we gave them this picture. It's a picture of Papa's house and his wife Bella, with my mom standing on the front porch with her cat. So a lot of good feelings there. And so
this was really an amazing tree we saw while we were in Franklin. It's called the Osage orange tree, and it now stands 90 feet tall. And I just imagine how many times Mariah must have walked past that tree, probably thousands and thousands, while she was enslaved at Quarantine.
And then in 2019, a local preservation group installed a memorial stone in honor of the enslaved Africans from Carnton Plantation. And by coincidence, it was done on my mom's birthday, November 9th, 2019.
We're coming to the end of our presentation. And again, we would like to thank the Bethel Group's branch of ASALH for inviting us for this very, very wonderful occasion.
So we have a whole lot of people to thank.
Right. Yes, we do.
I want to mention the Clandestinos. It's an informal group of folks here in Panama that have been so supportive and helpful to us. We've already mentioned historians and the archivists, Dr. Asante Temple, Dr. Williams from Howard, who did early reviews of the book, the city of Franklin, especially the late Vice Mayor Pearl Bransford, who hosted the family at her home when we visited. She was just wonderful. The director of the Franklin Housing Authority, Mr. Jackson, and his assistant, Alma McLemore, who's on the call. Hello, Alma.
Yeah.
Chair, and the other board members of the, of the African American Heritage Society of Williamson County. They honored us with a plaque for Preservation Award, and we're very grateful to them. And then we had a number of people, this is not by any means all of them, but these are some of the people who in the US and in different parts of the world have helped us spread the word about Clandestine.
And special thanks to our editor, Ife, another Ife,
Yes.
who is who is also on the line.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
So thank you so much, y'all. We are very happy to have had the opportunity to share this with you. And we leave you with this thought. True history has been shrouded in disinformation and deception, just as this last remaining African quarters is shrouded in this mist. And that history, distorted as it is, and weaponized against us as African people. We're not the only ones, other people as well. But we can uncover and excavate and share much of it, and we encourage you to do your part to do so. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Well, we want to thank Damani and Ife and Damani, ladies first, for their lovely research, for their passion, and definitely for making this an intergenerational conversation. I think that is what's the most salient part of the book to me. So what I would like to do, I think there was one question in the chat, but I would also, one question was, do you have a photo of the mural you can show? And I'm not sure what the mural is, the one on the building, the panels you had there, but I did direct them to your website as well for that. And I definitely encourage everyone to buy the book and definitely support this. So quick question. As you look at this book, and we've told you this before, it reads like a picture, it reads like a movie. What are the next incarnations of this story for the lay public that might not be willing to pick up an ebook or a physical book? We have a playwright that's sitting beside you, so I'm wondering what's the next incarnation of Clandestine?
Well, you know, it feels like a mini series to us, you know, and that we had a lot of reaction from filmmakers, script writers. A script writer on here, by the way, Dennis, I think is still on, who did some amazing work with what we had. He's in Hollywood, does scripts, has some great work of his own, and so we've been exploring possibilities. But I'll be very honest with you, we got to sell more books. You know, if you're going to try to get people interested in making a movie, they want to know, all right, how many books did you sell? So we got to sell more books. But it's a natural for a mini series. It could make a great feature film as well. We have been exploring those possibilities. If anybody has great connections, anybody know Oprah or Tyler Perry, you know, let us know.
And that's excellent. And so I'm thinking too, in terms of the sweeping novel from enslavement to the 21st century, what era would you say, and I'd like both of you to chime in, would you say was the most intriguing for you in terms of the tenacity of Mariah or her husband or her children? What element, if you could narrow it down to one, or maybe your top three?
That's a tough one, Ida. I have to tell you that the part that was most amazing to me, I'm a part of a discussion group online for over 10 years. There's at least one person on the line from that group. And through that group, I learned about
more fireworks.
More fireworks. I guess I was getting ready to talk about African fort, so I guess. But let me put it this way: African people in the West, we fought in the United States. We fought with the British against the Americans for our freedom. We fought with the French against the British for our freedom. We fought with the Spanish against the Americans for our freedom. We fought with the Native Americans against the Americans for our freedom. So the consistent element of this is that we look for allies where we can find them. And those allies shift, and those allies, unfortunately, betray us. History as well documents that. So we must depend on ourselves. But to me, the African fort in Apalachicola, Florida, in around 1814, 15, right after the end of the War of 1812, is such an amazing example of self-determination, self-defense, and armed, right, and armed struggle that should stand as a symbol of resistance and resilience for us. And we tell that story in Clandestine.
Yeah, and I would certainly agree with Damani. And as I said in the presentation, I was totally amazed and fascinated by what I learned about the Black Seminoles and the Native Americans fighting together. So that's just amazing to me. So I would agree with his assessment.
But
So
Ida,
that
your
de-
question also reminds me that Mariah died in 1922. So she's born in either 1838 or 1832.
Yeah.
You know how that goes. But so she lived through, an amazing period of history, U.S. history and world history. So it's hard to pinpoint one, but that's the one I would pinpoint.
I love that idea that you're talking about, the idea of being engaged in agency for self-defense and self-preservation. It puts to death the myth of docile slave. So there is a question that the issue of reparations for African descendants is sweeping not only the history, but the world. Do you see the history of the story of your ancestors fitting into this discussion about reparations in this possible national conversation that we're having in America about addressing that?
I think it's part of that story. There were efforts to get reparations. We didn't include it in the book, but there was a woman by the name of Callie House and a man named Mr. Vaughn who organized early efforts to secure pensions for formerly enslaved people. They may or may not, I don't recall using the word reparations, but certainly they were and are due, I'll say that.
Excellent. And I would love to see, since the book is so easily read, it's also very informative with actual primary sources. So I'm wondering if you thought about marketing to high school groups or other kinds of reading circles in maybe Girl Scout troops or Boy Scout troops. We're trying to build out branches in our association with high school and elementary school students. We want to replace ourselves with people who understand history, but not make it so droll. And the way you bring life into this with the lovely trailer your son and grandson did would appeal to another generation who's not as staged. So have you thought about that in terms of maybe partnering with Boys and Girls Club of America or any of the fraternal or sorority organizations that have youth guilds to kind of make it a, not mandatory, but a considered reading and break it up? Because I think that's what we might be considering doing in the Bethel Deuce branch going forward, because it'll be some way we could gift that book to some young people.
Well, we volunteer clandestine for that effort. Yes, we have, and we have made one approach so far. We have another in the works. The first one is to a school that I attended as a very young child in New York. Y'all might not believe this, called the Little Red Schoolhouse. but
and the other is to an organization in Franklin, Tennessee.
Right, and that's right. And the third is to a Greek letter organization. We're going to say which one that we are about to approach. So we think that clandestine could be an auxiliary kind of textbook. And kind of, in a way, we don't like to say that because then people think of textbooks as being dull, but I think you put your finger on it. told a story that in itself is compelling, we believe. And the reviews, we have just about all 5-star reviews on Amazon.
Right.
And one of the things that people say is that the story is compelling, and we believe it is because it's real, and involves real people.
And once again, I can't just stress the point enough that as lace historians, the passion you're telling this story with the scholarship makes it credible, because most, quote, academic historians want things to be somewhat heavy in the data, and you're using original data. You're actually finding primary sources, but the way in which you're using this narrative format, or the historical narrative, really helps it make the characters have 3 dimension. And the fact that you're seeing your family name in these various places that you didn't even know these are my family. So I think there's a lot of that with the young people that are discovering, like with their grandparents who are in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. So when we talk, because they don't understand life before them. If you're 15 or 20 years old, it's like, I began, you know? So I think when they actually see my grandmother did what, my aunt did this. So I think people are really concerned. There's a thirst. And this has been another silver lining of this horrible pandemic to force us to slow down and look at what is life, who am I, and where did I come from? So I think this story and the way in which you did this work over, how many years did it take you all to do all this research?
Well, it's a long time,
Many.
I retired in 2004. We did other things, of course, along the way, but I was looking. And then after I had the revelation in 2013, it really got serious. So then it was research and writing during that time. So
It was a journey for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying, actually, he was looking for his father's people.
Oh.
That's how it all started. And I didn't have any success with that, and decided that he would just look to see what was going on his mother's side.
So a quick note on that, because I see Shamil's on the line. My dad was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and he and his sister came from Kingston to Panama, and he lived here for a few years. I don't know exactly how long. My aunt stayed here, Aunt Blanche, and I ask every Panamanian I meet, "Are you my cousin?" Because she stayed here, had I think about a dozen children. So I have all these cousins that I can't find yet. So I'm still looking.
I tell them they're in New York.
They're all in New York. That's our joke. They're all in New York. But along the way, I found other cousins from Jamaica because of DNA. And so it's been very amazing.
Great. We have a question in the chat. How do the authors avoid their work from, quote unquote, misinforming and deceiving? How do you separate and weave fact and fiction? Footnotes. What are your techniques?
Yeah, listen, this was really a struggle for us, because it is fiction. It's historical fiction. And we realize that people will read and they won't be able to tell the difference, what we made up and what was factual. So what we did on the website, we have something we call verifications, and we have a couple hundred pages. No, I'm sorry, a couple hundred
items,
citations of the historical backup for the things that are included in the book. So if you read something in the book and you get to African fort, and you say, "Oh, they made that up. There's no African fort in Apalachicola where the Seminoles and the Africans fought together against America. That never happened." Then you can go check it out on our site, verifications, and you'll see all the documentation about that. So the only thing we could really say is that if you're reading dialogue of something that happened in 1870, it's probably likely that we made that up.
Yeah, sometimes we're now reading it and we're saying,
"Does that really happen?" Or do happened to me just the other day. Just the other day when I mentioned Maxwell House Hotel, I had to go back and look it up. Wait a minute, was it really at that? Yes, that was the first national meeting of the Klan. So I would just say that, if you read it with discernment and some common sense, most of what is fiction will come through to you. But the skeleton, the basic elements of the story, the historical events are true.
Yes, well, thank you so much for all of your commentary. I'm putting your website in the chat as well. And someone was questioning about the ebook that can be built out to combine with the website. So they might have missed that there is an ebook that was available pre-print version. And I'm not sure if the ebook is still for sale.
It is.
Yes,
Okay,
it
excellent.
is.
So there is both print and ebook on. I have both formats as well. Now, I'm going to get through it. I've only gotten as far as the Civil War, but now I want to know why she wore all black. So that's my next. I will fly. I got to do it.
Very interesting.
So you've sparked my interest. I'm going to get. So before I see you in person again, I would have at least finished the book. But I want to thank you so much for your warmth and for visiting with us. And I wish you all the best. And I want people to understand that when they see you on the red carpet in a year or two from now, they're going to say, "Wow, that sounds familiar. I think I might have met that couple. I might have." Yeah. So we're getting a pre-Oscar, blow up of this in terms of Black people doing for our ancestors what needs to be done, telling their stories and sharing with our progeny so that we can go into the future aware of who we are. So I'm going to turn this back over to Eric White and thank everyone for being in attendance. And please do check the chat.
And thank you again.
Let me do one more shout out. I see a DNA cousin, Yolanda. How you doing? We found each other on DNA.
Well, I want to.
Hi, Mommy. This is Doris from Detroit.
Hey, Doris, how are you?
I'm doing
Another
well,
cousin.
Doris. How are you guys? Good to see you and Effie.
Good. Doris is related to my grandmother. Papa's wife, Della Johnson, is in Doris's family tree as well. And we met each other through another cousin.
Wonderful.
Indeed.
Okay, Eric, I'm going to turn it back over to you and we're going to close out.
Okay, I want to thank Ife and Damani for an exciting presentation. If you go to the chat, you'll see how to get access to the book as well as to their website. Please do that before we sign off today. I want to thank all of our guests who joined us today. And we invite you to come back to our next presentation that will take place on May the 23rd. We're having Deidre Hill Butler, Dr. Deidre Hill Butler, who is going to be talking about her forthcoming book. It's called Beyond Mammies and the Matriarchs, Visibility of Black Stepmothers, which would be an interesting discussion. And in June, we are having Chris Haley, who's an archivist, who's going to be talking about the research of enslaved families within Maryland State, that he found in Maryland State Archives. We've had a number of very exciting presentations over the last